Good morning, everybody. We've still got a little bit of morning left. I can see people having chats. Resume your seats as you wish. Wander around. That's why we're here in this location. I'm Matthew Wright-Simon. I'm very delighted to be hosting this lovely bunch of people, for you, lovely bunch of people here today. And nice to see you in shady spots and so forth. We're talking about creative responses to the climate crisis. We've got plenty of time for questions and ruminations on what you've heard from these wonderful creative beings. And if anything's come up from the previous sessions as well that you feel will, add nourishment to the conversation, let's do that too. We've got about 3/4 of an hour. The microphone's in the middle as well, so I'll mention a few sort of guidelines around that. You've heard about the QR codes, and I noticed there are a bunch of them on the tables underneath the plane trees. And we've got, best part of an hour to really enjoy one another and find out about what's happening with different practitioners and what do you people do. And I've really made it pretty loose. So I'm asking people to tell you a bit about themselves. So it's almost like a dating show. So, write your notes, decide who you're particularly keen on, and they might be the person you'd like to ask a question. But Caitlin, you're sitting closest to me. Would you like to introduce yourself, tell us a bit about what's your thing?
Hi, my name is Caitlin Allen Moore, and I want to acknowledge that we're gathering on the lands of the Kaurna people and pay respects to elders past, present and emerging. This land was never ceded, and I feel quite privileged and blessed to be able to tell stories here when their storytellers have been here for much longer than me or any of my ancestors who've been around. So I feel widely inadequate sitting next to these wonderful people, so I'm just going to not look at them for a second. My main trade is creative producing. I'm an emerging creative producer. I'm one of Carclu's creative producers this year, and a couple of years ago I started my own company called Wickedly Good Productions, which is all about telling wickedly good stories through the form of theatre and podcasting. And I think the reason that I'm sitting here is because one of the nice little niches that a lot of the work that I'm working on, the stories that I'm helping to tell, fall within the climate crisis, and talking about that in ways that aren't hopefully too scary and overwhelming, and kind of bring it down to people in a way that they can understand and connect, because art is one of the ways that we can all connect with each other. So have a show on at the Fringe called You're All Invited to My Son Samuel's 4th birthday party, which might be the longest title in the Fringe. If you have another one, please let me know and I will fight them very politely in a car park. And that's about looking at the climate crisis in the framework of a 4-year-old's birthday party, which is probably the last place you would think about it, but it's absolutely relevant. So creative producer foremost, a writer secondly. I write a lot of poetry. I'm a little shitty poet, as I like to refer to myself. No, I refer to myself as a spoken word artist, and if you recognise my face, it might have been on an open mic stage. And in my poetry, I talk a lot about human connection and the earth and mythology and all that kind of stuff. And yes, I think that's all I want to say about myself.
That's a wonderful way of warming us up, Caitlin. Thank you. Lovely to meet you. And being here in Gumillya is such a privilege, and lovely to be welcomed here by Uncle Mickey. So we're in a good spot. Ali, would you like to share a little bit about yourself?
Hi everyone, my name's Ali Gumillya Baker, and my family come from the west coast of South Australia. My nana was born at a place called Fowler's Bay, and my great-grandmother was born at a place called Yikla. And we're Mirning from the Nullarbor, but I've grown up on Kaurna country, and I want to acknowledge Kaurna Yada. I want to acknowledge Tandanyanga, and that we're actually sitting as well in a mine site here where it dips down. Uncle Lewis, I remember him talking to me about how this site was quarried to build Old Parliament House, and that this site here where it comes down is a spot, a sacred Kaurna place. And so I wanted to kind of tune in to the fact that for my old people and for the communities that I've grown up in, chaos descended upon us a long time ago, and the chaos and the kind of crisis that we're experiencing at the moment is a continuation of a crisis which descended upon my great-grandmother when she was living in the desert. And for our communities, that discomfort is a place that we occupy, and I wanted to acknowledge that. But I'm also an academic at Flinders University. I teach to Indigenous and Australian studies. I mainly teach non-Indigenous students across a range of degree programs, Indigenous histories. I've studied a degree in visual arts, an honours degree in visual arts in the 90s. I've done a master's in screen studies in filmmaking and then a PhD in cultural studies, but I've always been looking at my family's relationship to that knowledge. And I'm also part of a collective of Aboriginal women academic artists called the Unbound Collective, and my sister girls are Simona Logater, who's young Wunjara, Natalie Harkin, who's a poet, who's Narunga, Faye Roses Blanche, who's Yidden Jibma Barbaram from Atherton Tablelands. And so part of our work is really kind of thinking about collectivity and how what ideas bind us together and what ideas might set us free. And how do we understand scholarship and thinking in relation to action? So we have done a series of sovereign acts, and we're interested in kind of that process. So, I'll pass over to Debbie tomorrow.
That's great. It's beautiful, rich territory. Please. And Tamara, I know your practice is very grounded in working with a collective as well. So share a bit about yourself, Tamara.
Sure. My name's Tamara Bailey, and I'm primarily a visual artist. Mostly work in sculpture and installation. And today I'm here as a representative of another visual arts collective. We just call ourselves SA Artists for Climate Action, and we are myself, Sue Bone, Zoe Frenny, Sarah Waters, and Gigi Hussain, and I think they were sitting way down the end there, so hello. I'm sort of speaking for myself as well as our group today. I think our group was invited to speak, and I was the person that had time to come along. And that's sort of how our group got started. We were all having similar conversations, and we were all already making art about some of these issues that we've heard speakers talk about this morning, and that I'm sure we're all well aware of about some of the crises facing us at the moment. And we were making art from a place of what are our personal responses, but also some of us make work about the legacy of the settler colonial cultures that we specifically have here in South Australia, in Australia, and what we could do about those sorts of things, or how we can uncover new ways of connecting with that. But we're also getting really frustrated with the lack of political action, with the lack of leadership in these areas, with the lack of resource allocation. And as busy individuals that were, straddling creative practice and day jobs and responsibilities to other people, we felt powerless to really create that change that we see the intense need for. So we just started having a conversation together about what could we do that might effect some change greater than we individually could create. And we're still extremely tiny. One of my big ground rules is no more admin, because nobody has time for another organisation or another web page or another committee to be on. And so we just started thinking, what are simple things that we could get people to do? And have been trying to kind of push forward with that as well, and come up with new ways to highlight that and to use creativity to build connection, and to try to drive some change in the sector.
Thank you, Tamara. Thank you.